US. You guys always think you're number one when it comes to this. Sadly, that is not necessarily true. In the US, you're actually tied for 28th place around the world, and you have a score of 0.74. Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, Meet Me in the Center. My name is Andrew. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, welcome. And if you are returning and have watched others, welcome back. It's good to have you back. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be recording a topic as one video, and then I'm going to be hopefully find a way to chop it up and release it into smaller videos so you guys don't have to sit and watch the full unedited version. I'm just trying this. The topic that I'm going to be talking about, I actually already have filmed the series, but I went back and watched, and I didn't feel good about how it came out. I don't think I got the points that I wanted across. So I'm going to try to do it again, and I'm going to try it like this, and I'm going to see if it works, and if it does, you'll see this, and if not, hey, you'll never know. So there you go. So we're going to be talking about free speech and freedom of expression. So the right to free speech just means you're allowed to say most things. The freedom of expression includes speech in it, but it also includes things like art. So there's a myth that is Americans believe, and not all Americans, obviously. I know Americans that are fully aware that this is not true, but there is this myth in the US that they're the only place with the right to free speech. This is untrue. Most countries in the world have some form of free speech or freedom of expression. These days, it's less of a question of who does and doesn't and how much they have. So, like I say, most places have it. The thing I think we should be looking at is how can it be improved? How can it be made stronger in certain countries or in all countries? Because I don't think any country is perfect. I think everyone is able to make improvements. So before I get any further, what I want to do is I just want to lay out the Canadian and the American version of free speech. So bear with me. I am going to read this. I wanted to get it right word for word. So in the U.S., the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So, the right to religion, the right to free speech, the right to the freedom of the press, the right to peaceful assembly, and the right to government redress. Those 5 things are covered under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. As an American, I hope you are aware of those things. I know some of you aren't, which is very sad. That's something I would be fully aware of if I lived in the U.S. So what does freedom of speech look like in Canada? Well, it is under our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is like your U.S. Constitution and your amendments. It's very similar in most ways. So under Fundamental Freedom Section 2, everybody has the following fundamental freedoms. A, the freedom of conscience and religion. B, the freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media communications. C, freedom of peaceful assembly, and D, freedom of association. So essentially they cover the exact same thing. And under freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, although it doesn't specifically say the right to government redress, that is covered under that as well. So basically they cover the exact same things. just worded slightly differently, obviously. So why do I think the U.S., many people in the U.S. has this belief that they're the only people that have the right to free speech? I think it's partially a wording thing, and I think it's also just a mindset that some Americans have. So if there are Americans out there, and actually this has changed in recent years a lot, because there's more of an anti-American view that is surging from the far left in the country. But I think for a long time in America, they were number one, and if you said otherwise, then you were un-American, you were unpatriotic. There's a flaw in that because if you're number one, why do you have to improve? If you're the best at something, why improve? So instead of looking and say, hey, this is how we could make things better, they said, we're number one, we don't really have to do anything. The other reason I think they hold this belief a lot is just the wording, the right to free speech. A lot of countries do not have the right to free speech, but they have freedom of expression, which essentially means the exact same things. It's just the wording itself that's slightly different. And so I think they kind of are like, oh, well, we're the only ones with this, not realizing that there are other places that have the exact same things. So how do we calculate who is best with freedom of speech and expression in the world? Well, there's actually an international institute that does this. It's called the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, and they have a database. It's called the Global State of Democracy Indices, the GSDI. And so one of the things they look at is the freedom of speech and expression. So they gather information from as many countries as they can either get it from or will give it to them, and they take eight areas surrounding the freedom of expression and speech, and they put those all into an equation, and they come out with a number. So this number is between zero over here and 1 over here, right? So let me get my hands in camera. There we go. Mirror image. It's so confusing to my brain. So 0 would be like absolutely no freedoms, and 1 would be like the perfect, most free country in the world when it comes to freedom of speech and expression. North Korea is almost at 0, and I'll talk about who's number 1 in a little bit. But so the topics they look at print and broadcast censorship efforts. So is the media being censored? They look at the harassment of journalists, because if journalists are harassed, if they're doing a certain story, they're probably less likely to do that story. They look at media self-censorship. Is the media self-censoring themselves for whatever reason? They look at freedom of discussion for women and men. They look at both separately. And they look at freedom of academic and cultural expression. So, for instance, is a professor at university allowed to teach whatever he wants, or are there limits to that? And by the way, those aren't just governmental limits. Those could be societal limits as well. They look at freedom of opinion and expression, how much freedom you have in that, and they look at freedom of speech and press. And so they put those all together into an equation that they have, and they get a number for the world, for each country essentially. Now I have a website. I'll link it in the description below. It basically has information on every country and how they ranked. I'll also leave a link, by the way, for the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance and their database. So how do we rank in North America? That's a good question. US, you guys always think you're number 1 when it comes to this. Sadly, that is not necessarily true. Now remember, this is a scale from 0 to 1, 0 being the worst and 1 being the best. So in the US, you are actually tied for 28th place around the world. and you have a score of 0.74, which isn't bad. I mean, you're in the top 30. That's a great place to be. Canada scores a little higher. We're tied for 10th. We have a score of 0.83, so doing a little better. But actually, I think the next time this comes out, Canada's going to slip. There are a couple reasons for that, including a couple laws that were passed in Canada that might actually affect that score overall. Okay, so U.S. and Canada, we're doing pretty good, and no complaints there. Who's number one? Well, that's actually Denmark. Denmark is number one, and they scored 0.95, so almost perfect. They are, according to the database and the equation that they have, they are the closest country to being perfect when it comes to freedom of speech. And interestingly, I was looking over that data about all the different countries. I forget which country is in second place offhand. I can look that up really quickly. I still have that out here, but let's see if I have it. Belgium is number 2. So and interestingly, so Denmark scores a very good 0.95, and Belgium only scores a 0.87. So they are actually a fair bit under. So there's a big gap between first and second. So what does this mean for us in US and Canada? Well, I don't think it's a bad thing that we're not number one. Obviously, I want as many countries in the world as possible to get to where Denmark is, and possibly even get better than where Denmark is. But it just means to me that there are things that we can get better on. We've got the foundation. The foundation is set and it's sturdy. What we need to do is kind of start to nitpick. We need to go into very little things that are happening, and we need to say, okay, we need to be able to change this, and we need to protect it. I think that's a good way for both the US and the Canada to get better. And don't get me wrong, when I say you're 30th in the world, there's I think they looked at 160 somewhat countries. So 30 out of that's not bad. You're in the top best parts of the world when it comes to freedom of speech and expression. So I'm not saying even US at 28th is a bad number. That's a good score, but it just means that it can get better, essentially. But unfortunately, and I think there's a reason that the US and Canada are kind of slipping down the ranks a little bit when it comes to that. So in 2015, Pew did a poll, and they asked people around the world in as many countries as they could, essentially, and they tried to work out which countries' people felt that freedom of speech or freedom of expression was the most important thing. In 2015, the US ranked number 1. Canada ranked 6th overall. Another research organization basically redid the same thing in 2021, and US had slipped to 3rd place overall. Canada wasn't even top 10 at that point. It turns out that Denmark was one of the countries that overtook the US, and look at that, they've also overtaken US in the amount of freedoms they have. So I think that kind of is a worrying trend in Canada and the US. I think if it's not seen as important, it's easier to start chipping away at those rights. So if you have a country where a lot of your citizens are like, no, this is the most important thing, we have to deal with, we have to protect this, then it's going to be a lot harder for the government to come out and say, well, we need to just take this freedom of yours away. I mean, it can still happen, obviously, but it's a lot harder because people are more likely to put their foot down. They're more likely to do something about it. But if freedom of speech is less important to these people, the government might come in and say, "Well, this is a problem here. It's not a big problem. Don't worry about it. We're just gonna take this little bit away, and you'll still have your rights. Don't worry about it. It's all good." And then they just kind of slowly start to undermine and slowly start to cut it out. And then they can, the next time they go, "Oh, well, this is also a problem, and it's kind of like the other one, and you kind of let us do that." And so, no big deal, whatever. And we'll just take this away too. Don't worry about it. And so people will be like, "Well, it's, not a big problem. So I guess, yeah, it's fine. Whatever. We'll let them." That is a problem because basically what they're doing is they're undermining to the point where it could collapse theoretically. So I think that is something we need to be more cognizant of, more aware of in the future, especially in the US and Canada. If that number keeps slipping, then if the fact that we don't seem to care about free speech as much anymore keeps slipping, I guarantee our numbers from the global state of democracy indices will keep slipping as well. Because that's when, like I said, the government can do things to take it away, or it's easier for them anyway. Hey everyone, so I hope you enjoyed that section of my freedom of speech and expression video. There will be more to come. If you did like it, hit the like button, comment on what you thought, and think about subscribing if you want. If not, that's totally up to you. Until the next one, stay tuned. Bye-bye for now.